Hello, this is T West, and welcome to Afrosynergy.
French image of savagery to save Africans' lives. The French, along with the United Nations troops and Ivorians loyal to Alassane Ouattara, carried out savage killings in the Ivory Coast to install Alassane Ouattara as president, an IMF frontman for Western bankers. France was riding a high after successfully carrying out this savagery to remove Laurent Gbagbo from the contested presidential position in the Ivory Coast. It was now ready to go against Libya, thinking it would be a cakewalk, much like the Ivory Coast. In fact, France was quick to indicate that its jets were leading the charge with the bombing of Tripoli, and the British were not far behind. It did not take long before both of these Germanic tribes were begging for the United States to take the lead against the Libyan government. Barack Obama responded with the United States Navy hurling Tomahawk missiles upon the buildings of Tripoli, more than 100 in a 24-hour period. The French were about to learn that their savagery would be resisted by this small, tiny nation of Libya. They claimed they came to save lives. On today, a Libyan mother and her 2 children were murdered in their home in the city of Zlatan by NATO bombs. What you're looking at is a picture of the result of the NATO bombs. How is that for saving lives? This is what the leaders within the United States Senate and the President of the United States mean when they claim they came to save lives. Remember, George W. Bush used the same words as Barack Obama, saying they went to Iraq to, quote, save lives, close quote, and bring the Iraqis freedom and liberty. Under George Bush, at least 1.4 million Iraqis were killed. You Americans and Europeans did not want to count those deaths, and you don't want to look at the death count in your newspapers or hear it on the radio or on your television. Today, we have the same scenario playing out in Libya, with the Germanic tribes murdering Libyans, while Obama is more concerned about his re-election than commenting on the criminal acts being carried out by the United States and its NATO friends. Yet, he and other members of the American government talk about cutting the spending. If they were serious, including those doing the bidding of the corporate bankers through the face of the Tea Party, they would start those cuts by ending the war in Libya. But the French, the British, and other members of NATO assisted the United States militarily in Afghanistan and elsewhere. Therefore, shouldn't the United States assist them against Libya? After all, what is an alliance such as NATO if there isn't tit for tat? The father of the dead Libyan children, Mustafa Naji, said to AFP, quote, "Is this what you call protecting civilians? This is what NATO is here for? To kill our children?" Close quote. Again, this is exactly what they brought to Iraq: death and destruction. Not only was this Libyan mother and her children murdered by NATO, but others were seriously injured by the NATO bombing. July 11th, Gerard Louet, French defense minister, stated, quote, "We'll stop the bombing when the Libyans talk to each other and the military forces on all sides return to their barrack. They can talk to each other because we provide the proof that there is no solution by force." Close quote. Yes, you heard it right. There is no solution by force. Something that the African Union has stated from the very beginning. The French then spearheaded the call within the United Nations to bring attention to the drought and famine conditions in Somalia.
With millions on the brink of starvation, the UN has begun airlifting food into the drought-stricken Horn of Africa. UN officials say nearly 4 million people in Somalia face a full-blown famine, many of them children. Millions more in Djibouti, Ethiopia, Kenya and Uganda are struggling to survive. The head of the World Food Programme calls the crisis the worst she has ever seen.
In Dadaab here we're reaching up to 400,000 people with food, but now general food isn't enough for many of the children arriving. So what we're seeing is thousands of children in need of special supplementary
Another issue,
nutrition.
money. The UN says more than $1 billion has been committed so far, but it says it needs another billion by the end of the year to cope with the emergency.
These images in the recent days have galvanized attention of the public and of donors. So we're seeing an increase. We've seen something like $200 million in donations to the World Food Programme in the last couple of weeks.
But with thousands more pouring into aid camps every day, aid agencies are struggling to keep up with the crisis.
My message to the French is that you cannot kill thousands of Africans in other parts of Africa and then suddenly attempt to repair your savage image by calling for assistance to the Somalis suffering from the conditions of war and a state of war. Drought is not the main cause of the dire situation in Somalia. The policies of many of these same members of NATO that continue to bomb Libya is the main cause of the situation in Somalia. In 1990, the United Nations and its masters, the British, the French, and the Americans, called for military intervention in Somalia under humanitarian grounds, chiefly to protect the distribution of food in Mogadishu through the United Nations. It was not long until the more apparent reason for military presence was known, which was to capture or kill General Mohammed Farah Adi. Before this so-called humanitarian effort was over, a few thousand Somalis had been killed by American and other military forces within Somalia. In the video entitled "Kill You to Save You" on this Afro-Synergy channel, you know what I mean when I say the political leaders of these military forces say they come in the name of humanitarianism and to save lives, but in the end they end up killing more than they are there to so-called save. The saying, quote, "Beware of Greeks bearing gifts," close quote, is very old, but too few of you seem to understand its meaning or take it to heart. Laquette went on to state that if Gaddafi don't step down, quote, he will be in another room in his palace with another title, close quote. Well, these devils have been bombing every building, literally, and palace in Tripoli. This is very funny because Gaddafi has already indicated that he stepped down as leader in Libya many years ago. He has told the French and those drinking from the drunken savagery of an illusion of power that it is the Libyan people that the French and other Europeans must deal with. The French are not in any position to tell Gaddafi what to do within his own country, and neither is the United States. The overwhelming majority of the Libyan people support the Libyan government that they have had for the last 40 years. They do not support the criminals in Benghazi, and it may take a few more weeks before there's large-scale rebellion by the rebels against the Benghazi leadership. French Foreign Minister Alain Juppé indicated, quote, "The challenge is how to push Gaddafi to set aside political and military responsibility," close quote. And the question, quote, is not whether he must quit, but when and how, close quote. Again, French Foreign Minister Alain Juppé. The Libyan people, they support Gaddafi, and that's not going to change. The attempt to replace him and the government in Libya that he played a role in establishing, it has failed. The African Union was against this criminal bombing of Libya, but the criminal entities of America, Europe, and the Arab League relegated African leaders to the sideline. Never mind that the crimes against humanity that NATO was about to commit was about to be committed against an African nation and a key member of the African Union. Juppé stated, quote, "I do not have the answer, but the African Union is working on that," close quote. Juppé and the rest of these NATO gangsters had virtually shut out the African Union and trumpeted what Turkey and the Arab League had to say about Libya. When it came to gaining Turkey's support for the war against Iraq, Turkey and the Zionist state of Israel pimped the United States for $9 billion. Clearly, the leaders of Turkey are no friends of the Libyan people. The African Union was right, and the United Nations, the United States, Britain, and France, and all of their allies who supported the military actions against Libya were wrong, and they remain wrong. They have no intention of doing the right thing. If they cannot kill Gaddafi and his family and his supporters through violent means of deadly force, they will and are now planning to attempt to accomplish the feat in a more clandestine, sneaky, covert way. The Libyan government has armed millions of Libyan citizens with guns and ammunition. These weapons await any type of ground invasion the Germanic tribes might foolishly attempt. If such an invasion was to occur, hundreds of rebels would, along with the Libyan people, start shooting and bombing the foreign invaders. The Germanic savagery has bitten off of more than it can handle. They thought bombs and missiles would attain their goal. They thought setting up a counter-government would attain their goals. Now they think asking Gaddafi to step aside will do the trick. It never will, because too much Libyan blood has been shed. The only answer for savagery is to fight it. On the issue of saving African lives, France, you cannot repair your savage image by attempting to use the plight of the Somali people. Somalis have been going through this hell for 23 years, and you did not raise your voice. Only after slaughtering Africans in the Ivory Coast and committing more crimes in Libya, as you're doing now, do you now try to project an angelic image to cover for the savage images we are seeing weekly of Libyans butchered by your bombs, by your missiles, and by your bullets. This is T. West with Afro Synergy.